Out of every 1,000 golfers with a handicap, only 16 are scratch golfers. And I wanted to know what separates them. So I pulled 40 years of USGA records, 74 million track shots, and the story of a man who practiced 6,000 hours and still never made it to scratch. True story, he practiced for over 6,000 hours and he never got there. Before you decide what that means for your golf, you need to see where his hours went, because the data says that he just spent them in the wrong place. By the end of this video, you'll know how rare it is to actually become a scratch golfer, what separates handicap levels, and the realistic improvement that a golfer who gets to practice once a week can actually make in a season. My name is Isaac, and this year I've helped busy golfers break 90 for the first time, break 80 for the first time, and even cut their handicaps in half. If you only get one range trip a week and you're tired of sitting there guessing what you're supposed to do, I built a free plan down below called the 5-stroke season. You'll know exactly why we call it that by the end of this video. Okay, so the math on becoming a scratch golfer. Let's start with how rare it actually is. At the end of 2024, the USGA counted about 60,000 golfers with a handicap index of 0.0 or better. That sounds like a ton of people. Man, only probably 2,000 people watch this video. Imagine 30 times that. But it's not that big of a number, because 3.4 million Americans carry a handicap, which means 1.6% of golfers are actually scratch. Well, let's put that a different way. 1.6% of golfers who keep a handicap are scratch. Only about 13% of American golfers even keep a handicap index. So being a real scratch golfer is very much so being in the 1%. You are statistically more likely to meet somebody who ran a marathon this year than you are to meet a scratch golfer. Now, I'm a 26-year-old who played college golf, so my friend group is kind of right in the middle of that Venn diagram. I'll let you figure out how I feel about the running part. Now, in order to get to scratch, most people think I just need some better gear, more time, and I just need to grind harder to get out of the dirt. We have 40 years of data on how that plan works. In 1983, the average American male handicap was about 17. So in the past 40 plus years, we've had the invention of YouTube and all this new great technology and driver heads and putters, and instructions gotten better, and TrackMan and GC Quad and all these affordable launch monitors, and the average American handicap is 14. 40 years of improvement. All that to drop 3 shots off the average handicap index. Arcos did a similar study, and over the past 25 years, the handicap indexes have only improved by 1.9 shots. You would think that with all the access to information that we have now, especially within just say the last 10 years, that the average index would drop dramatically. 1.9 isn't exactly dramatic. So the standard plan obviously doesn't work as well as we would hope. So let's go to the guy who used the extreme plan, because maybe you're thinking, oh, I just don't have enough time, or I just don't work hard enough, or I don't have the right coach. In April of 2010, Dan McLaughlin quit his full-time job to pursue becoming a scratch golfer. He wanted to test the idea of becoming an expert in something with 10,000 hours. And before this commitment, Dan had barely played any golf. Then he started practicing 30 hours a week with elite coaches and structure and new equipment, and he logged every single hour. 3,690 hours in, Dan reached a 5.9 handicap. That is 153.75 consecutive days of practice. That's probably more than you and I will practice in the next 20 years. At 5,030 hours, he peaked and he hit his lowest index that he would get to, which was a 2.6, not a plus 2.6, a 2.6. That's excellent golf. That's probably the best player in your buddies group at most clubs, but it's not scratch. And then his handicap slowly started to drift backwards, and by January of 2015, he was back at a 5.5. Then unfortunately, a back injury ended the experiment at 6,000 hours. And I want to give Dan credit here. He didn't necessarily fail because the method failed. In all honesty, his time just got cut short because of the back injury. But still, 6,000 hours of practice got him to a 2.6 at his very peak. So clearly, time and resources isn't the problem. Weirdly enough, a 2014 meta-analysis in Performance Science actually predicted this. This study explained that across multiple sports, there was only an 18% increase when deliberate practice was used. This 18% increase in performance means that while hours matter, deliberate hours matter more. A man with unlimited time was not able to get down to scratch. If time was not the answer for Dan, then it's probably not the answer for you. If time was the answer, this video would be over and I would be editing this for a lot shorter amount of time. The answer is where that time goes. To know where that time should go, we need to take a look at the differences between these different handicap groups so we can identify what's going to move the needle the most. Mark Brody, who invented strokes gained, analyzed the PGA Tour from 2004 to 2012, and he broke down where scoring actually comes from for those players. It roughly works out to approach play accounting for 40% of scoring, off the tee accounting for 28% of scoring, around the green accounting for 17% of scoring, and putting accounting for 15% of scoring. Now, this does not mean that this is the amount of strokes that these people are taking. It means this is the difference between an elite player and a not elite player of how they're gaining their or losing their advantage. Take another look at that. Putting and chipping are the two smallest slices. And this is where you hear everybody talk about, oh, well, you have to be able to putt ball. You have to be able to get up and down from everywhere in order to score. While that is important, it's very clearly not the biggest lever. And I can promise you, somebody is typing right now trying to rail into me about something that Ben Hogan said or some high-level golfer even recently probably said. Here's what I'll say to that very quickly. Elite performers often don't know why they're elite. And that's a whole nother video that I should probably write, but we'll get there eventually. ShotScope's report that they just released had over 74 million shots in it. And when you walk up the ladder from guys who shoot 100 all the way to guys who shoot 80 to under par, the biggest lever in improving your score from every single level is just straight up how many greens you hit. And you might think that this means that scratch golfers are making a million more birdies than you. But Lou Stagner pulled the stats on this. Scratch golfers make 2.2 birdies a round. Even crazier, they make 4.7 bogeys a round. Not that I agree with how the handicap system works, but it's the best 8 of your last rolling 20. So you can average 75 like we see here and still be a scratch golfer. So if your goal is to become a scratch golfer, ultimately it's going to boil down to those two things right there. Avoiding bogeys as much as possible, and you're going to do that by hitting a ton of greens and keeping the ball in play. Scratch golf is simply boring golf executed for 18 holes. For the average scratch golfer, 50% of their rounds won't include a double bogey. That means that they're keeping the ball in front of them, making smart decisions, because as we found out in previous videos, most big numbers come from bad decisions. So this gap between you and lowering your handicap is not necessarily talent or the ability to go make 20-footers. It's the greens that you're not hitting and these doubles that you're donating. Which brings us to really the only question that matters in this entire video, which is how much can you lower your handicap this year or in the next year? Not with unlimited hours, but with a realistic Google Calendar and maybe being able to practice once a week. What's nice is Arcos publishes so much data that these kind of videos are super simple. They published data on first year improvement by starting handicap. This only included players who recorded 10 or more rounds in their year. If you started between a 0 and a 5, you could improve 2.14 shots. Between a 6 and a 10, 3.03. Between an 11 and a 15, 4.53. 16 to 20, 5.9 shots, and 21 and up could improve 8.85 shots in 1 year. What's cool is when they filtered to players who recorded 20 or more rounds, their improvement actually went up quite a bit. As much as I preach how to go practice with the limited time that you have, ultimately, if you want to get better at scoring, you have to go practice scoring. And I think that's the little hidden message in here is in order to get better at playing golf, you got to go play golf and be honest with yourself. If you have a bad day, keep track of those scores. You're going to learn more from bad play than you will from good play. And I know that keeping stats can feel like a giant pain in the butt, but if you grab the Player to Golf app down below, it takes 30 seconds a hole. And you can get $20 off a year every year for life if you use code Isaak, ISAAK, shameless plug. So the realistic number per Arcos's data is that you can get better from 3 to 5 shots a year. Obviously, you can't do that forever. That's where that free guide down below comes from. We can get 3 to 5 shots better if we're just starting in this improvement journey. Now, for me, I'm a plus handicap. I'm not going to be able to shave off 4 strokes off my handicap. But if you're new to this improvement space, it's very clear you can start shaving off strokes by simply making better decisions and practicing smarter. I've kind of got a real life test going on with Colby, who was one of our first testers on the app. He went from a 16 handicap in the fall to now he's an 8, and his goal is to get down to a scratch by the end of next summer. In all honesty, he's the reason I wanted to research this topic, because I was curious if it was even possible. Now for him, he's practicing more than once a week. He's really getting after it. And while Colby's trying to gain another 8 shots in the next year, Don't plan on being the outlier like Colby. Plan on being the median because, in all honesty, most of us aren't special. That's the reason there's an average. If you plan on being the median, that's going to be some great improvement. And then if you're the outlier, that's going to be even better. Once again, that free guide is going to give you everything you need if you're just practicing once a week. So, can you become a scratch golfer with a busy job and family life and a full Google Calendar? The honest answer depends on what we haven't talked about yet, which is where are you starting and how low have you been? If you were a scratch golfer a decade ago and you're a 5 now, it's probably going to be pretty simple because you understand the path to getting to being a scratch golfer. But if you've never been there and you're maybe a 5 handicap who's only been playing for 12 months, you don't understand the path up to the top of the mountain quite yet, so it's going to take you a little bit longer. Just as a reminder, Dan gave this thing 6,000 hours and never reached that mountaintop. What's great is we now have all this data that will allow you to plan and practice better. And very clearly, the difference between players that improved more versus the players who only improved a little bit within Arcos's database was they were tracking everything they were doing. And then they were building out a plan to get better on top of that. Once again, shameless plug, go download the app, 7 free days. So scratch golfer or 10 handicap or whatever your goal is probably shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be the next 12 months to gain 3 to 5 shots. So grab the 5-stroke season down below. Don't go scroll Instagram looking for tips and just let's go practice. Get off this app, go practice. All right, I'll see you guys next week.